Hi, Heart Siblings. Salam. You're listening to Heart of the Matter, a podcast by Heart to Grow, a reproductive and gender justice organization working in Muslim communities and the older sibling you can trust. We are your hosts. My name is Amatullah Solawa.
And I'm Nabila, and I'm here filling in for Sabrine. So, Sabrine, if you can hear me, I hope I do you justice. And I hope you all enjoy this episode today.
Sounds great, and I'm sure you will, Nabila. So today we're here with Sadiyah Bashir, and Sadiyah is a mother of three, a writer, a full spectrum doula, and an abortion doula. Her work as a writer has been featured in media outlets such as Al Jazeera, The Washington Post, and Button Poetry. In 2025, she was named a Reproductive Justice Fellow through Heart, and we had the amazing opportunity to work with her then, and that's also where she published From Safa to Marwa, an Islamically motivated guide to postpartum. So currently, she's pursuing her Master's of Science in Marriage and Family Therapy, where she hopes to bridge the gaps between perinatal support and mental health. And we definitely need more therapists. So, mashallah about that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, y'all. I appreciate it.
Of course. And Sadia, I actually got introduced to you from the RJ Fellowship, and something I've always wondered about is, first of all, we know that you're super well established in the reproductive justice space, and many people may have come to know you through another space though, which is your poetry practice. So I know we're going to talk about such serious topics, such important topics, but before we do, I do have a question, and my question is, what poem or rap song gives reproductive justice?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so the first one that I can think of is going to be On My Mama by Victoria Monet. I actually read somewhere that she wrote that while dealing with postpartum depression. And then the second one is going to be Cozy by Beyonce off of the Renaissance album. There's a line in there where she says something like, "Kiss my scars because I love what they made." And
Oof.
yeah, and then it's like, "Comfortable in my skin, cozy with who I am." Like, yes.
Oh my God, those are two good ones. And you know what? The other reason for this question is, I don't know about you all, but my Spotify algorithm is so off. So I'm gonna take those two songs, those two recommendations, and recalibrate, because we need more RJ also in our music spaces. So thank you for sharing those two songs.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. And one thing I've noticed is that a lot of celebrities are being more vulnerable about their birth journeys, especially Black women, the Black celebrities that we have, because for a lot of them it can be traumatic and everything. So I'm just thinking about that as we ground in reproductive justice in the songs as we start. So my question actually is, what was your entry into reproductive justice work as a whole? Because I am one of those who kind of knew of you first as a poet. So to see you in this new space is like, oh, that's super cool. So I'm wondering, is this something you were always doing on the side, maybe in another form, or was it something that you formally had decided to begin pursuing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, I knew about reproductive justice, like you said, kind of not by its name, but my grandmother, Sakina Rahimullah, she had passed due to medical malpractice when my dad was a teenager, and she was pregnant at the time. And es essentially, the story goes that she had pneumonia and was being, kind of like just like all of her concerns were being kind of like pushed off. It's like, "Oh, you're pregnant, you're pregnant, you're pregnant." Mind you, she had been pregnant like a good 7 times prior to that. So I think and folks knowing their body and things like that, right? And yeah, and it turned out that she had pneumonia, and unfortunately, she and the babies that she was carrying had passed. And so this is my dad was 16, and my dad is the eldest, and so a lot of my aunts and uncles didn't grow up with their mother. Um, the blessing in having the eldest as my father was that I did get to hear a lot about who she was as a person and the family that she came from and all of these different things. But it was has always kind of been like this looming lore around our family of like this lost matriarch and how we lost her. So that was kind of like my first introduction into reproductive justice before I really knew what it was. And then my second or rather my first introduction to doing reproductive justice work was essentially friends reaching out to me because they had had abortions and they just wanted to let someone know like this is what's going on and this is what's happening with me. And coming from it from a space of like I don't really need anything, I just want someone to know that this is happening. And thankfully I was someone that they could trust with those stories. And so that was kind of like my first introduction to doing any kind of like doula work.
Yeah, thank you for letting us into that. And I think it's super sad, but unfortunately, a lot of us also entered into reproductive justice because of like a reproductive injustice, whether it's like
Yeah.
in our personal lives or structurally and things like that. And then we began doing the reproductive justice work, maybe not by name, but like, giving out sex ed or reading on certain topics and being a resource in our communities. And that really reflects that.
Yeah, I deeply resonated with you sharing these two particular entry points. And I wanted to uplift a couple of things. So the first thing you mentioned was around, the lore of the matriarch of your family. And you said it super clearly where she knew her body. And
Mm,
the biggest part of medical malpractice is that denial of
yeah.
someone having that intuition of knowing their body and still being denied access to resources, information, and like all the support that could have kept them alive, thriving, all the things. And so I think that's like super important because it also goes into the storytelling piece, right? You just shared the lore, but you're also sharing this super common thread that connects everybody in the RJ movement space in
Yeah.
terms of like the power of storytelling and the power that each of us bring in recognizing we have a body, we own it, we know whatever it is to be true about it. So how do we find others? And you said, this is kind of also your journey into doula work. And so it does bring us to your doula work, right? With growing awareness around Black maternal mortality rates, there's been
Mhm.
more conversations around the importance of doulas for Black birthing people. So for you, what considerations or ways of being do you bring to your doula practice?
Yeah, so I think um right, so come becoming at birth with my first child and then my second child having like what I think most people can say consider like a dream birth. Like everything was just like roses and and just like lovely. And like one of the main differences, right, was the fact that I had a doula. The work that I do in regards to like mental health is something that I also bring into like the work that I do as a doula because there is so much mental fortitude that it takes to try to get pregnant, try to get unpregnant. You know what I'm saying? There's so much mental health stigma, especially during the postpartum period. And one of the things I always say to people is it doesn't matter, whether you decided to have an abortion or you had, a live birth. Postpartum is still a thing, right? Like postpartum is it's still something that happens. And so, yeah, even understanding like, postpartum mood and anxiety disorders and different things like that, I feel like is really important in the work that I do. And then also to allowing family members to be brought into that world a little bit, because I do think even in the year of our Lord 2026, we still have a lot of people who just think that like pregnancy is something that's just very like simple and like everybody does it and everybody gets sad during postpartum and like all of these different things, right? And so how can we also bring that level of education to the support people, the family, etc., to understand like what the person is going through?
Thank you. I really appreciate that because, a part of mental health stigma is also thinking about like community impact and also like community conditioning to these very ideas around childbirth, pregnancy, fertility, infertility, or like the choice to not wanting a child. And then even on top of that, doula work in and of itself. And so I love that you're bringing that mental health piece as a way to bridge that gap of understanding of this is what it is and these are all the different ways that everyone can be a part of this process and that it's not just on the birthing person.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree. And I'm also thinking about what you said about people minimizing other people's experiences. And even if it is like in your grandmother's case, where they're naming like specific needs or experiences and just being dismissed, or just not being believed, or not even having a name for what they're going through because maybe there's not a lot of education with that. And then also, as someone who's online, I see a lot of people coming to pregnancy because of that with a lot of fear. Like there's this whole list of like all the bad things that could go
Yeah.
wrong during your pregnancy and like
Yeah.
can be helpful, but also make people like really scared. So I'm wondering with that, what are some of the common concerns or fears your clients are coming to you for support with during their pregnancy?
Yeah, once again, postpartum is a really big fear. It's gotten to a point where I think like culturally, people just loop postpartum depression into like postpartum. So I'll hear people say like, "Oh, I'm realistic to get to that sign of postpartum for you," especially if I'm doing birth doula work. And so what they really mean is I'm worried about dealing with postpartum depression, right? And also too, a lot of people don't even know about like postpartum psychosis, postpartum anxiety, postpartum OCD. Like it's just the depression. So that is a really major concern, especially when we're talking to Black women. It's really, I want to stay alive. I want to be alive. I want to make it out of this alive. And I want my child to make it out of it alive. How do we do that? Right? Like what are the ways, what are the steps? What can I do to make sure that myself and my child make this out alive is also a really, really big one. I think working with Muslim communities, another big one is like, especially if it's a hijab wearing person, they're always just like, I want to remain covered, and I and I respect it 100%. And there's always like in my head, I'm always just like, there's a portion of birth where you're not going to care. Where you're truly like not gonna care. So I'm always just like, make sure like your hijab is like a one piece hijab, because if it comes loose at any point, right? Like, and your goal is to stay covered, if it comes loose at any point, you might just like throw it off, and that's not necessarily what you're going for. So let's make sure it's a one piece hijab. It stays, tight with you. So that's another fun one as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's so, I'm just like imagining it with you have like your cute little Vela and maybe the magnet loops and then push one, it's all gone. It all goes down through the, down the drain.
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to kind of go back to this evidence-based education, the education piece, and I mean, in light of education, it's August, which is, I actually didn't know this, but August is National Breastfeeding Awareness Month. And so, not to kind of do like a hard pivot, but in terms of education and what community looks like, what support looks like, I'm curious to know what is breastfeeding support? Like, how do families take part in this or not? What does the education around that look like? And you talked about, like having a resource. Like, let's talk about the resource you created through like the RJ Fellowship. Like, I know you love a good resource because you created an extremely beautiful guide for folks that are dealing with postpartum, right? And so, yeah, I'm just super curious. I know I asked like 10 different questions, but whatever
Yeah.
you feel called to answer.
You're totally good. Yeah, I think yeah, happy National Breastfeeding Month. One of the things that's interesting about Breastfeeding Awareness Month is that each week is for a specific group. So there's like one week that's specifically for like Asian and Pacific Islanders. And I believe the last week is Black Breastfeeding Week. I always think that that's like really cool. Like each each kind of like ethnic group and race kind of get their own week to kind of highlight their cultural practices and different things like that. I think one thing that is universal in regards to like family is feeding the person who is breastfeeding. I mean, that's literally one of the biggest things. And especially when you're dealing with a newborn, the sleep schedule is off, the food schedule is off, the everything is off, right? And so making sure that like folks have those like nutritious meals that they love and want to eat. And I do think that there's a lot of misconceptions in regards to lactation that we still have today. Once again, a lot of the stuff that we had because of survival, right? Like, I'm African American, and so a lot of the practices that we have today stem from enslavement, right? And there's a direct correlation to Black American women having to breastfeed white children and the lack of breastfeeding in Black American communities today, right? Black American communities are one of the least likely to initiate breastfeeding and also continue breastfeeding past a certain point. And so also understanding what kind of things we did to adapt out of survival, right? Like we gave our kids certain foods because we weren't allowed to breastfeed our babies on the same breast that the white babies were being breastfed on, right? And so now we're kind of at a point where like your grandma will be like, give that baby some cereal. It's like, hold on. The baby is a little too young for cereal. Hold on, right? But this is something that we had to develop out of survival. We had to give our babies cereal because we could not breastfeed them, right? But yeah, so also like accessing those supports in regards to, lactation consultants in the hospitals, in the birth centers, as well as nonprofits that do, lactation education. I know where I was trained, Mama Tota Village, they specifically do a lactation education for grandparents. So how can you support what are some of the myths that we learned from back in the day of how to feed a baby and all of these different things and yeah, so I think a lot of nonprofits are also kind of catching up to like how can we make this intergenerational as well. In regards to the resource guide, I love a good resource guide, and I really think of it from the perspective of like, what did I need when I was when I was pregnant? What did I need when I was postpartum? Like, all of those things. What's something like quick that I can like grab and like that's tangible for me as opposed to like reading an entire like novel about postpartum. It's like, yeah, in reality, that would be great, but in practice, not necessarily. And then, especially if you're kind of like two or like you're on your second or third child, right? Like, and you have older kids, how realistic is it that I'm going to be able to read this entire book? So, what are some of the ways that I can access um, my own thoughts from being consistently in parenting mode in a way that's tangible and quick? And I think that's really where the guide came from.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm thinking about a lot of the things that you said, but even the postpartum thing, because I don't know who said it originally, but someone said postpartum is forever. And I'm like, wow, you're really not the same. Like once you give birth, and just thinking about like the robustness of the support needed, like your
Mhm.
family, grandparents need to be trained, the lactation support, all the other supports, and you like as a doula hold that. But then also you're an abortion doula. And I feel like for a lot of people that's like opposite. Like, what do you mean? You're helping pregnancy, you're helping abortion, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So with that, I'm wondering, do you see your work as interconnected? Like both ends of the spectrum, I guess, of the doula work.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely see my work as connected. Once again, it's all reproductive justice. And I think that it's very important to know if you're in the birthing space, I think it's very important to know what is necessary for someone to no longer have a child, because there are so many different reasons as to why someone may want or need to have an abortion. And additionally, um, some of the um ways in which we access one thing or another, pregnancy or abortion or whatever, kind of work in tandem depending on the situation that you have. Like, for example, when someone has a miscarriage, they give a person side attack in order to expel everything from their body. Side attack is also um, the same medication that they use to induce labor as well, right? So having that knowledge now, I understand that if I have a client who has a miscarriage and they get side attack, I can approach it from an evidence-based understanding because I also know what side attack does in the space of birth. So I definitely see it as interconnected, and I don't see it as these like two like polar opposite things. I think actually I don't even think of it as two different things. I think all of it in the realm of reproductive justice.
No, I love that. Like, you're really talking about the duality, right? We talk about abortion and childbirth, and there's something to be said about like mortality and fatality and
Mm,
rebirth, and really thinking about the cyclical process of what do we know to be true about like motherhood, about family, like family spaces. You also touched upon like the intergenerational piece, and then there's also something to be said about like the intercommunity piece.
yeah.
How are we all involved in all of these different processes? That is the spectrum of childbirth to abortion, or the other way around. I
Hmm.
mean, that's not a question. It's more of like a, my mind is blown. Like, I feel like you're just dropping all these different gems, and I'm just trying to pick up the different pieces of wisdom and trying to connect them. And I'm just so blown away by you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So now we're going to transition a little bit to talking about motherhood. And as you can see, like, we're doing kind of like different phases of this conversation. And, apart from being a doula, right? And what we know to be true about doing the work of reproductive justice is that individuals bring their whole selves to this work. And
Yeah.
so a part of bringing our whole selves to this work is us talking about the fact that you yourself are a mother and you've named it, right? Which is something that you have said is important to what is kind of you piecing together the different threads and what is very helpful and useful for you. So in terms of your experience of motherhood, how does that shape your doula work, which I know you touched upon, but I'm curious to know, like, in I guess a more deeper way, like what does that look like? And overall, you keep saying all this is RJ, which yes, agreed. And so I just want to know, what is motherhood for you in stepping into the work piece, but then also recognizing that it's fluid, right? It's porous. We can't completely turn off us as humans and our personal lives and lived experiences as we do the work, but then we also can't sometimes turn off the work when we are living our life. So how do you make it work? How do you do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Oh gosh. I so I think in regards to that question, the first thing that kind of comes up to me is that all of my children are assigned female at birth. So I have all girls. And so I also think about from an intergenerational perspective, the situation that happened with my grandmother, and also the fact that my mother had very traumatic births. I had very traumatic births, right? And kind of coming into doula work as a way of being like, okay, at what point is this gonna stop? Like, at what point is this no longer going to be like our story of just like this is what birth is, these like very traumatic births. Like I have told people like the closest I have ever been to death was giving birth, right? And so a lot of my work in regards to like doula work comes from the fact of like I'm trying to rewrite my own like essentially legacy if my children do decide that they want to have kids. And then I think like Another thing too is also understanding capacity. So like when I was pregnant, I stopped doing births. I think too, because birth is a very like it takes a lot. Like it's very a lot of people don't realize like you have to be in shape because like sometimes you might have to pick up a whole person who's carrying another person. Um, and so I was just like, yeah, while I'm pregnant, I don't think I should be lifting somebody who's like 150, 170 pounds right now, right? So understanding like my own capacity and then, after giving birth myself, right now I'm postpartum, and so I may not necessarily be the in the best situation where it's like I'm already dealing with, I need support, right? I need postpartum doula support, right? So maybe like this isn't a great time for me to also be like supporting births in that way. I think a lot can be said in regards to self-disclosure. In doula cases, I have had moments in which clients have asked me like, has this ever happened to you? Has that ever happened to you, etc. But I think also too, birth is such a heavy personalized experience that you also have to present it in a way where it's like, yes, and my experience is not gospel, and my experience is not going to necessarily be your experience. I have a different genetic makeup. I have, you know what I'm saying? You might be more active, I might be less active. Like, there's so many different variables, right? We might be of different races, you know what I'm saying? You might actually end up with an OB who's a lot more competent than the one I ended up with. There's so many different things, right? And so yeah, I think that is also another thing where sometimes doulas can kind of get caught up in the like, especially if you've been through like birth before, of this kind of just like um I want this person to have what I didn't get to have out of my birth plan, and like all of these different things. And I think one of the things that I always remember from my training as a doula was like, your goal like isn't to always get your client in the driver's seat. Your goal is, if your client is in the trunk, you're in the trunk too. Your goal isn't to try and push them to more advocacy, more autonomy, more this, more that. If that's just not where they're willing to be right now, like that's not, you're not being in alignment with your client.
I love that. I love that just because there's such a great mirror to the work of gender-based violence. And so I forgot to mention who I am. I'm Nabila, but like who's Nabila? I work with them with the lens to breed at heart, and I'm the director of survivor advocacy. I'm a forensic social worker, and I've been in the field of gender-based violence for 13 years. But you really are hitting the nail on the head about being in the trunk with, the birthing parent, the mother, the birthing person. And it's very similar in the GBV space in terms of you allow them to be in the driver's seat or the trunk or what have you, because at the end of the day, they're the most impacted. And something we
Right.
always talk about at heart is the ring theory is we don't choose the thing for the person that's impacted. We show up in the ways that make sense to our role, to the conversations that we have with them, and the ways in which we hold that space for them. So I just love, love, love that you're naming this in terms of the doula work that you're doing, but also just motherhood and how that's shaped how you show up for your clients.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about like how you said everyone has their own experience. And I'm thinking about your Substack where you shared like some of your experiences with like, giving birth, actually choosing to be sterilized and going through that process, and just other like things like happening in the Black community. And they have like really funny titles sometimes. I'm thinking about like The Grandma is the Baby on Arrested Development and Black Mothers. But then also very serious, like Healthy Baby, Healthy Mama, talking about how racialized fat phobia affects medical treatment, which is really real, especially for a lot of Black mothers and Black birthing people. So I'm wondering, like, what inspired you to start your Substack? I love it, but I'm just saying, like, what made you start it?
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely have to shout out two friends. Shout out to my friend Tahira and my friend Nadira. because they both were like, "Girl, you're a writer. Like, why, like, why don't you write?" And it literally would just be because I'm just ranting about stuff on FaceTime, and they'd be like, "Girl, you need to write about this." Like, and yeah, and also too, just me being in a space of just like, I have so many thoughts, I have so many ideas. Also, shout out to my husband Eric, because before it reaches anybody else, it definitely reaches him. He's like my first line of, this is pissing me off or annoying me, and I need to talk about it.
And I mean, wait, what a way to kind of go full circle, right? Because we started off talking about the lore behind the matriarch of your family and the power of storytelling, and how we come to kind of the end of us chatting with you around you really utilizing storytelling as a tool for not only dropping wisdom, but also providing a safer, braver, more community centered space for people to feel that sense of belongingness, but also a space for them to question and be curious and really think about, okay, what do I know to be true about myself and my wants and my needs? And so, if that's not the power of storytelling, I don't know what is. Um, no, it's just absolutely incredible. You are a writer, you are a storyteller, you are someone who's really kind of at the forefront of our communities, pushing us to do better, to show up, right? And I say this as someone who is not a mother in the traditional sense, someone who's possibly considering it and will have to take a non-traditional method, and also someone who is friends with people that are pregnant and need that community, especially if they're away from their own families. So how do you show up for those that are birthing people, or going to be birthing people? So I was extremely, it's been such a pleasure being able to chat with you and just gather all this information. And sadly, before we go though, just to keep things continuous with education, one last question that we have for you is, what are your top three tips for new Black Muslim mamas?
Oh, that's a good one. My top three tips for new Black Muslim mamas. Um, get if you are interested in breastfeeding, you can get a pump, a hospital grade pump through your insurance. Two, planning for your postpartum in the sense of who you are as a person and what your body is going through is just as important as planning for the postpartum of the baby and their development, and the cute outfits that they're gonna wear and the photo shoots and all those things. You need to have community who has that same attention to detail about you as you have for the baby. And then I think a third one I would probably say is also kind of in that same vein, have, just like you have a birth plan, have a postpartum plan as well. Who is allowed to come in, who are the emergency contacts, who is allowed to bring food, uh, who was allowed to hit you up at a random time, who was allowed to hold the baby, um, all of those things. I think it's really important to plan for the postpartum as much as you plan for birth.
I love that. And I think one thing that I'm taking away from this conversation is sometimes the mama is the baby. Like it might not be the grandma is the baby, but the mama is the baby
Always.
100%. Like you need that support. You can't just be always like pouring from an empty cup. You need people who are around you and like concerned about your health just as they're concerned with the baby's health, because it really is like intertwined, even in like how you're able to care for the baby is often dependent on how you're able to care for yourself. So I'm really glad that we had this conversation, and I appreciate your tips, and I hope other people and the listeners will find them thankful, um, find them useful. So I really appreciate you being on this episode with us today.
Thank y'all. And thank you so much for inviting me. I've had a great time.
Of course. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of Heart of the Matter. If this episode resonated with you, make sure to like, comment, and leave a review. If you're interested in keeping up with Sadiyah, follow her on Instagram at IdaBWellen and follow her Substack, The Woman, The Well.
Yes, and let us know your thoughts. And then after you've checked out her Substack, check out our Substack, Nakhla, for our reflections from this episode, and follow us on Instagram at Heart to Grow if you haven't already. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review as well. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.